She said, "I'm leaving you for someone wealthier, over dinner." I just smiled and paid the check. A month later in court, she discovered what I'd been building in secret while she planned her escape. The look on her face when the judge read those numbers? Priceless. My name is Holden Davis. I'm 44 years old, and for the past 6 years, I've worked as an aviation safety consultant after retiring early from commercial flying. The pay is solid, the work matters, and I sleep better knowing I'm not responsible for 300 lives at 30,000 feet anymore. But to Cassie, my wife of 13 years, solid wasn't enough. She wanted spectacular. The restaurant she'd chosen was one of those places where the menu doesn't list prices and the sommelier acts like you're insulting him if you order anything under $200. Cassie wore a navy silk dress I'd never seen before, her hair swept up in a way that looked effortless, but probably cost $100 at the salon that morning. She'd been distant for weeks, working late, taking calls in the other room, smiling at her phone in ways that had nothing to do with me. I ordered the salmon. She barely glanced at the menu before waving the waiter away with a glass of Pinot Grigio. The candle between us flickered, casting shadows that made her face look unfamiliar, harder somehow. "Holden," Cassie said, setting down her glass with a soft clink. "I'm leaving you." I set my fork down slowly, kept my hand steady on the table. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head for 3 weeks, ever since I'd hired Owen's investigator and seen the first batch of photos. Preston Langford. Luxury car dealerships. The kind of guy who wore Rolex watches and talked about his portfolio at cocktail parties. "I've fallen in love with someone wealthier," she continued, her voice steady, almost clinical. No apology, no hesitation. Someone who can give me the life I deserve. I blinked once, let the words settle. Then I nodded, reached my water glass. "That's great," I said evenly. She stared at me, clearly thrown. She'd expected tears, maybe anger, some kind of desperate negotiation. Instead, I signaled the waiter with 2 fingers, asked for the check. The bill came, and I signed it without looking at the total. $340 for a dinner I'd barely touched. I stood, pulled her coat from the back of her chair, and held it open like we'd just finished watching a movie. She slipped her arms through the sleeves slowly, confusion replacing the confidence she'd walked in with. "Best of luck with everything," I said, turning toward the exit. I didn't look back, didn't wait for her response. I just walked through the heavy wooden doors and out into the cool September air, leaving her standing there in her expensive dress, surrounded by clinking glasses and murmured conversations. She'd probably rehearsed this scene around for weeks. The valet brought my truck around. I tipped him $20, climbed in, and drove home. My phone stayed silent the entire way. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. I'd left the porch light on that morning, but Cassie must have turned it off before she left for the restaurant. A small thing, but it felt deliberate somehow, like she was already erasing me from the picture. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The silence hit me first, not the peaceful kind you get after a long day, but the hollow kind that tells you something's missing before your brain catches up. I flipped on the hallway light and walked toward the bedroom. Her closet was half empty. The hangers dangled bare where her designer dresses used to hang, the ones she'd bought over the past 6 months with money I didn't ask questions about. The shoe rack looked like someone had looted it. Gone were the heels, the boots, the strappy sandals she wore to events I was never quite dressed right for. I opened the dresser drawers one by one. Empty. Not a sock, not a belt, nothing. The bathroom counter where she used to keep her makeup and perfume bottles was wiped clean, just a faint ring of dust where her jewelry box used to sit. Even her toothbrush was gone. I walked through the rest of the house methodically, cataloging what was missing. The garage was lighter too. Her yoga mat, her tennis bag, the storage bins where she kept seasonal clothes. All gone. She must have hired movers while I was at work this week. Packed up everything during those afternoons when she claimed to be showing properties with her mother. The kitchen was the strangest part. The coffee pot was still there, the one we'd gotten as a wedding gift. But the expensive French press she'd bought 3 months ago was gone. So was the stand mixer, the knife block, half the wine glasses. She'd taken what was valuable and left behind what was sentimental. On the kitchen counter, I found a single piece of paper, folded in thirds. No envelope, no name. I opened it slowly. "Thanks for everything," it said in her handwriting. "Enjoy your simple life." Below that, 2 documents, both notarized. The first was a quitclaim deed removing her name from the house title. The second was a division of assets agreement, dated 3 days ago, signed by both of us. Except I'd never seen it before. Then I remembered last year, when I'd had that health scare and she'd insisted we get our affairs in order. I'd signed a stack of papers without reading them carefully, trusting her to handle the details. No contest, it said in the margins. Clean split. Fair division. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where we used to eat breakfast together before work, back when she still asked how I slept. The house felt bigger now, emptier, like someone had removed all the furniture, even though most of it was still here. My phone buzzed. A text from Owen. You good? I typed back. Yeah. She's gone. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Finally, come by the office tomorrow. We need to talk about next steps. I set the phone down and stared at that note again. Enjoy your simple life. She'd meant it as an insult, a parting shot to remind me that I wasn't enough. But sitting in a quiet house, I realized something. She hadn't just left. She'd walked away so cleanly, so completely, that she'd already decided I wasn't worth the fight. And that was fine by me, because while she was measuring her life by Preston Langford's bank account, I'd been building something she didn't even know existed. I folded the note, tucked it into my wallet, and went upstairs to pack. Owen's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown, the kind of place where everyone wore suits that cost more than my monthly truck payment. His secretary waved me through without asking questions. She'd seen me here enough times over the years to know I wasn't just another client. Owen was standing by the window when I walked in, phone pressed to his ear, nodding at whatever the person on the other end was saying. He held up one finger, wrapped up the call, and turned to face me. You look like hell, Owen said, setting his phone down on the desk. Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear. He gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. I sat, and he pulled out a thick manila folder from his drawer. The tab read, Davis versus Davis, confidential. How much does she know? Owen asked, flipping it open. Nothing. She thinks I'm still pulling $200,000 a year from consulting contracts. Owen nodded slowly. And the Boeing deal? Closed yesterday morning. 9:47 a.m., to be exact. I got the confirmation email while I was sitting at a red light on my way to meet a client. The Boeing contract had been 18 months in the making. A comprehensive safety audit partnership worth $94 million over 5 years, with my firm handling third-party inspections and compliance reviews for their commercial aviation division. It wasn't just money. It was legitimacy, the kind of contract that put you on the map in the aviation industry. I'd signed the NDA back in March, which meant I couldn't tell anyone, not even Cassie. Especially not Cassie, given how things had been going. The final paperwork had closed 2 days after she walked out of that restaurant. She filed for divorce 4 days ago, Owen said, sliding a document across the desk. Standard petition. Irreconcilable differences. She's asking for 50% of marital assets, spousal support, and the house. I scanned the document. Her attorney was someone named Richard Voss, a guy with a reputation for bleeding his clients dry while promising them the moon. Fitting. What does she think she's getting? I asked. Owen pulled out a financial worksheet. Based on what she knows, about $350,000. The house is worth $200. Your retirement accounts are around $80. And she thinks your business is worth maybe $70,000 based on last year's tax returns. And what's she actually getting? Owen leaned back in his chair, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Well, the house has some problems she doesn't know about yet. Septic system failed inspection last month. There's also an underground oil tank that's been leaking for who knows how long. Environmental cleanup alone is going to run north of $200,000. So the house is basically worthless once you factor in remediation. I felt something settle in my chest. I'd known about the septic issue for 6 weeks. The oil tank I discovered 3 weeks ago when I'd hired an environmental consultant to do a full property assessment. I hadn't told Cassie. Hadn't seen the point. What about the retirement accounts? I asked. Those are split down the middle. She gets $40,000. But here's the interesting part. Owen slid another document toward me. Your business. She thinks it's worth $70,000 based on last year's revenue. But you restructured 4 months ago, remember? Created an LLC, brought in 2 partners, shifted your personal consulting income into a different entity. The old business? Worth about $12,000. Everything else is in the new structure, which she has no claim to because it was formed after separation. And Boeing contracted with a new entity. The $94 million doesn't touch her. It's separate property, post-separation income. She gets nothing. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Cassie had walked away from a fortune she didn't know existed, and she'd done it with such confidence, such certainty that she was trading up. "There's one more thing," Owen said, pulling out his phone. He scrolled through something, then turned the screen toward me. A photo of Preston Langford shaking hands with another man outside a car dealership. "Your wife's boyfriend. Want to know what I found?" I nodded. Preston Langford Luxury Motors. 5 locations across 3 states. Looks impressive, right? Except it's all smoke. He filed for bankruptcy protection 8 months ago. The dealerships are in receivership. He's operating under a management agreement while the creditors figure out who gets what. The cars you see on the lot, consigned from auction houses. He doesn't own any of it. So he's broke. Worse, he's drowning. $2 million in personal guarantees on loans he can't repay. The Porsche he drives, leased under his ex-wife's name. The condo downtown belongs to his business partner, who's letting him stay there rent-free until the bankruptcy sorts out. I stared at the photo. Preston Langford looked exactly like the kind of guy Cassie would fall for. Expensive suit, perfect hair, the smile of someone who'd never missed a meal he couldn't afford. "When's the court date?" I asked. 3 weeks. She's going to walk in expecting a settlement. What she's going to get is a reality check. I spent the next 2 weeks moving out of the lakefront house and into a temporary apartment across town. A furnished place with tall windows and a view of the river. It was smaller than the house, quieter, and I liked it better already. No memories. No ghosts of arguments that never quite resolved. Cassie's attorney sent 3 emails demanding a settlement conference. Owen responded to each one with variations of "discovery is ongoing. We'll be in touch." It was legal speak for "we're not negotiating until we're ready," and it drove Richard Voss insane. I could tell by the increasingly aggressive tone of his correspondence. On a Tuesday morning, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When I checked an hour later, the message was brief and unsettling. "Mr. Davis, this is Vincent Calabrese. I need to speak with you about a mutual acquaintance. Call me back at this number. It's urgent." The voice was calm, polite, but there was something underneath it that made my instincts flare. I called Owen immediately. "Who's Vincent Calabrese?" I asked when he picked up. There was a pause. "Where did you hear that name?" He left me a voicemail. Said it was urgent. "Don't call him back. Forward me the message. I'll handle it." "Owen, who is he?" Another pause, longer this time. "He's a loan shark. Operates out of a pawn shop on the south side. Technically legal, but he's got a reputation for collecting debts in ways that don't show up on credit reports." My stomach dropped. Why would he be calling me? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Owen called back 3 hours later. His tone was different, sharper. "Your father-in-law," Owen said without preamble. "Robert Harmon. He borrowed $210,000 from Calabrese 6 years ago. Gambling debts. He was supposed to pay it back in installments, but he died 4 years ago. Heart attack." I remembered Robert's funeral. Cassie had been devastated, her mother stoic and cold. There'd been whispers about financial troubles, but I'd assumed it was just estate settlement issues. "The debt didn't die with him," Owen continued. "Calabrese tried to collect from Judith, but she claimed she didn't know anything about it. So he went after Cassie. She's been making payments for the last 3 years. Small amounts, couple hundred here and there, but never enough to cover the principal. She owes him $187,000. Jesus. It gets worse. Guess who co-signed the original loan?" I didn't need a guess. I already knew. "Me," I said quietly. "You." Robert used your name and social security number to co-sign. "Forged your signature. Calabrese has the paperwork." I felt the walls closing in. "That's fraud." "It is. But proving it means going to court, hiring forensic experts, spending months and thousands of dollars fighting a loan shark who has connections to people you don't want to meet in dark alleys. Calabrese is willing to settle. He knows he didn't sign it. He just wants his money back." "How much?" "He'll take $150,000. Cash. Wipes the debt clean, no questions asked, and he leaves you and Cassie alone." I sat down heavily on the couch. $150,000. It was a fortune to most people, but with the Boeing contract, it was manageable. The question was whether I wanted to pay off Cassie's debt or let her drown in it. What happens if I don't pay? I asked. Calabrese will go after Cassie. Legally at first, through collection agencies and judgments. But if that doesn't work, he has other methods. And she's about to be a single woman with no income and a house she can't sell. I thought about Cassie sitting in that restaurant, telling me she was leaving for someone wealthier. I thought about the note she'd left on the kitchen counter. Enjoy your simple life. Pay him, I said. Owen was quiet for a moment. You sure? Yeah. Get it in writing that the debt is satisfied and my name is cleared. I don't want this coming back in 5 years. Understood. I'll handle it. I hung up and stared out the window at the river below. Cassie had no idea how close she'd come to disaster, and she'd never know I'd saved her from it. That wasn't why I was doing it. I was doing it because walking away clean meant no leverage, no debts, no excuses. When the divorce was final, I wanted her to have nothing to blame but her own choices. My sister called on a Sunday morning. I was sitting on the balcony of my apartment, coffee going cold in my hand, watching boats drift across the river. I almost didn't answer. Claire and I talk maybe twice a year, usually around holidays or when someone in the family died. Holden, she said when I picked up. No greeting, no small talk. I need to tell you something. Go ahead. She was quiet for a moment, and I could hear traffic in the background. She was driving somewhere. I tried to warn you, Claire said finally. Before the wedding. Do you remember? I did remember. 13 years ago, the night before Cassie and I got married, Claire had pulled me aside at the rehearsal dinner. She'd been drinking, her words careful and measured in that way people get when they're trying to say something difficult. She's using you, Claire had said that night. Cassie doesn't love you, Holden. She loves what you can give her. I'd brushed her off, told her she was jealous, that she'd never liked Cassie anyway. Claire had nodded, squeezed my shoulder, and walked away. We hadn't talked about it since. I remember, I said into the phone. Her father's dead, Claire continued. Robert owed money to dangerous people. Cassie knew about it before you two got married. Judith told her that marrying you would solve the problem, that you'd take care of it without even knowing. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. How do you know this? Because Judith told me. She was drunk at your wedding, bragging to her sister about how smart they were, how they found a nice, stable man with a good income who'd never ask questions. She said Cassie's job was to keep you comfortable and distracted long enough to clean up Robert's mess. I closed my eyes. 13 years. 13 years of thinking I'd built something real, something that mattered. And it had all been a transaction from the start. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I heard she left you. And I wanted you to know it was never about you not being enough. You were always the Mark Holden. From the beginning. The line went quiet. I could hear Claire breathing, waiting for me to say something. Thanks for calling, I said finally. I'm sorry I didn't try harder to stop you. It's not your fault. We hung up. I sat there for a long time, watching the boats, thinking about the note Cassie had left. Enjoy your simple life. She thought she was insulting me, but really she'd been describing exactly what I'd wanted all along. Something simple, something honest. She'd never given me either. Owen called 3 days before the court date. His voice was different, quieter than usual. I need you to come to the office, he said. There's something you need to see. I drove downtown, parked in the garage, and took the elevator to the 14th floor. Owen's secretary waved me through without a word. When I walked into his office, he was standing by the window, a manila folder in his hand. Sit down, Owen said. I sat. He handed me the folder. Inside was a medical record from a women's health clinic dated 4 months ago. The patient name was Cassandra Davis. The procedure listed was medication abortion, 7 weeks gestation. I stared at the paper. The words didn't make sense at first, just letters arranged in a pattern that my brain refused to process. Then it hit me all at once. She was pregnant, I said quietly. Yes, and she didn't tell me. Owen sat down across from me, his expression carefully neutral. The timing lines up. She would have found out right around the time she started moving money, right around the time she started planning to leave. I thought about that period 4 months ago. Cassie had been distant, working late, spending more time with her mother. I'd thought it was work stress, maybe some problem with the real estate market. I'd given her space. She didn't want the baby, I said. No. According to the records, she went alone. No emergency contact listed. She paid cash. I set the folder down on Owen's desk. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I felt like I should be angry, devastated, something. Instead, I just felt empty. She was going to leave anyway, I said. The baby would have complicated things, made it harder to walk away clean. Owen nodded. That's what I think too. Does she know we have this? No. Medical records are private. I had to pull some strings to get it, and it's not admissible in court. But I thought you should know. I stood up, walked to the window. The city stretched out below, indifferent and enormous. Somewhere down there, Cassie was probably sitting with Preston, planning her future, believing she'd made the right choice. She threw away everything, I said. The marriage, the baby, all of it. For a man who can't even pay his own bills. Yes, and she has no idea what's coming. Owen stood beside me. No, she doesn't. I turned away from the window. Let's make sure the court date goes exactly as planned. The envelope arrived by courier on a Thursday afternoon. No return address, just my name typed on a plain white label. Inside was a thumb drive and a handwritten note on expensive stationery. Mr. Davis, you might find this useful. A concerned observer. I plugged the drive into my laptop. There were 3 folders. The first contained bank statements from an account in Cassie's name I'd never seen before. Transfers from her mother's real estate business, labeled as consulting fees. $47,000 over the past 18 months. Money Cassie had never mentioned, never declared on our joint tax returns. The second folder had photographs. Cassie and Preston at restaurants I couldn't afford, hotel lobbies, a beach resort in Florida. The timestamps went back 11 months. Almost a year of meetings, carefully scheduled during my business trips, during the hours I thought she was showing properties or meeting clients. The third folder was a video file. I hesitated before clicking it, but curiosity won. It was security footage from what looked like a hotel bar. Cassie and Preston sitting in a booth, drinks in front of them. The audio was surprisingly clear. When are you going to tell him? Preston's voice, smooth and confident. Soon. I'm waiting for the right moment. I need to make sure the house is secured in my name first. Cassie's voice. Your mother said she'd take care of the financial side. Make sure he doesn't get suspicious before you're ready. She will. Mom's been planning this for months. She even found someone to appraise the house low, make it look like it's worth less than it is. That way he won't fight me on it. Preston laughed. You're cold, Cassie. I like that about you. I learned from the best. My mother didn't stay rich by being sentimental. The video ended. I sat back in my chair, staring at the frozen image of my wife smiling at another man, plotting how to take everything while making it look like I was getting a fair deal. I called Owen immediately. I just received something interesting, I said when he answered. 20 minutes later, I was in his office, and Owen was reviewing the contents of the thumb drive with the intensity of a surgeon examining x-rays. This is good, Owen said finally. Really good. The bank statements show she's been hiding income. That's fraud. The video shows premeditation and conspiracy. And the photographs establish a timeline that proves she was planning this long before she filed. Who do you think sent it? I asked. Owen shrugged. Someone who wants to see her lose. My money's on her sister. Sophie has always been the honest one in that family. Can we use it in court? All of it. The bank statements are public record once we subpoena them. The photographs are just documentation of her activities. The video might be trickier, but if it was taken in a public space, it's admissible. This changes everything, Holden. I looked at the frozen image of Cassie on Owen's screen. She looked happy, confident, completely certain she'd covered every angle. She had no idea someone had been watching her the whole time, documenting every move. What happens now? I asked. Now we go into that courtroom tomorrow, and we show the judge exactly who she is. Not the victim she's pretending to be, but the person who's been systematically planning to defraud her husband for almost a year. I stood up, walked to the window. The sun was setting over the city, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow, Cassie would walk into court expecting a settlement. What she'd get instead was a reckoning. Make sure her attorney sees everything, I said. I want him to know exactly what he's defending before we start. Owen smiled. Consider it done. The courthouse was smaller than I expected. Just another building with harsh fluorescent lights and uncomfortable benches in the hallway. Owen and I arrived 15 minutes early. Cassie was already there, sitting with her attorney Richard Voss, wearing a conservative gray suit that was probably meant to make her look sympathetic. She glanced at me once when I walked in, her expression carefully neutral. I nodded slightly. She looked away. "All rise," the bailiff said as the judge entered. Judge Sarah Hendricks, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She'd been on the bench for 20 years, according to Owen, and had a reputation for not tolerating games. "Please be seated," Judge Hendricks said, settling into her chair. "We're here for Davis versus Davis, dissolution of marriage. Mr. Voss, I understand you're representing the petitioner." "Yes, Your Honor." Voss stood, his suit expensive, his smile practiced. "We're seeking an equitable division of assets. My client has been cooperative throughout this process and simply wants what's fair." "Your Honor," Owen said, standing, "we've prepared a comprehensive financial disclosure that I believe will be relevant to the court's determination of what constitutes fair." He handed a binder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Another copy went to Voss. I watched Cassie's attorney open it, saw his expression shift from confidence to confusion to something close to panic as he flipped through the pages. Judge Hendricks was reading silently, her face impassive. After what felt like an hour but was probably 3 minutes, she looked up. "Mr. Voss, were you aware that your client has been receiving unreported income from her mother's business for the past 18 months? Voss opened his mouth, closed it. No, Your Honor. This is the first I'm hearing of it." "Were you aware that your client began a relationship with Mr. Preston Langford 11 months before filing for dissolution?" "No, Your Honor." "Were you aware that Mr. Langford filed for bankruptcy 8 months ago and currently has a net worth of negative $2 million? Cassie went pale. I saw her lean toward Voss, whispering something urgent. He shook his head, his expression grim. And finally, Judge Hendricks continued, pulling out another document. "Were you aware that the respondent, Mr. Davis, recently secured a contract with Boeing worth $94 million, finalized 2 days after your client moved out of the marital home?" The silence in the courtroom was absolute. I could hear Cassie's breathing from across the aisle, quick and shallow. She turned to look at me, her eyes wide, her face drained of color. "Your Honor," Owen said smoothly, "the timing is critical here. Mrs. Davis abandoned the marriage before this contract was finalized. Under California law, post-separation income is separate property. She has no claim to these funds." Voss was flipping through the binder frantically. "Your Honor, we need time to review these documents to verify." "Mr. Voss," Judge Hendricks interrupted, "your client has been hiding income, conducting an extramarital affair, and has conspired to defraud her husband. The evidence is substantial. I'm inclined to grant the respondent's request for a division heavily weighted in his favor." "But the house," Cassie started to say, her voice breaking. "The house," Judge Hendricks said, looking at another document, "has severe structural issues. Septic system failure, underground oil tank contamination, estimated remediation costs of $200,000. The property has negative equity. You're welcome to it, Mrs. Davis, but I suspect you'll find it's not the asset you thought it was." Cassie turned to Voss, her composure shattering. He was shaking his head, gathering papers, clearly realizing he'd walked into a massacre. "We're going to take a 15-minute recess," Judge Hendricks said. "Mr. Voss, I suggest you have a frank conversation with your client about settlement options. This case is not going the direction you anticipated." The judge stood and left. I sat quietly while Owen organized his files. Across the aisle, Cassie was crying, her hands shaking, while Voss tried to explain something in a low, urgent voice. She looked over at me one more time, her eyes red, searching for something. Mercy, maybe. An explanation. I looked back at her calmly, then stood and walked out of the courtroom with Owen beside me. The settlement conference took place in a windowless room on the 3rd floor of the courthouse. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, a table too big for the space. Cassie sat across from me with Richard Voss, who looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. Owen was beside me, his briefcase open, documents stacked in neat piles. "Let's be clear about the situation," Owen began, his voice professional and cold. "Your client concealed income, committed tax fraud, and conspired to defraud my client. The house she's claiming has negative equity. The boyfriend she left him for is bankrupt. And my client just secured a contract worth $94 million that she has absolutely no claim to. Voss cleared his throat. We understand the position is less favorable than we initially thought. Less favorable? Owen raised an eyebrow. Mr. Voss, your client is facing potential criminal charges for tax evasion. The IRS will be very interested in those offshore accounts and unreported consulting fees. Cassie's hands were shaking on the table. She'd removed her wedding ring at some point. The skin underneath was pale, a thin band of white that hadn't seen sun in 13 years. What are you offering? Voss asked quietly. Owen slid a document across the table. The house, which your client wanted so badly, will transfer full ownership to her, along with all associated debts, liens, and environmental cleanup costs. She gets her personal belongings, her vehicle, and $20,000 cash. In exchange, she relinquishes all claims to any other marital assets, retirement accounts, and future income. $20,000. Cassie's voice was barely a whisper. That's it. That's more than generous considering what you're getting is worth less than zero. Owen said calmly. The alternative is we proceed to trial, where a judge will see evidence of your fraud, your affair, and your conspiracy to defraud your husband. You'll get nothing and potentially face criminal charges. Voss leaned close to Cassie, whispering urgently. Her face was pale, her eyes red. She looked at me across the table, and for a moment I saw something break behind her expression. Not anger, just the terrible realization of what she'd thrown away. Where will I live? She asked. The house is unlivable. That's not my client's concern, Owen said. You made your choices, Mrs. Davis. You chose Preston Langford, who can't afford to take you to dinner without checking his bank balance. You chose to leave a stable marriage for a fantasy. Now you're living with the consequences. Cassie looked down at the document, her shoulders sagging. What about Preston? What about him? I spoke for the first time. My voice was steady, calm. He's bankrupt, Cassie. Everything you thought he had, gone. The dealerships are in receivership. The condo isn't his. Even the Porsche is leased under someone else's name. You left me for a man who is less than nothing. She looked up at me, tears sliding down her cheeks. I made a mistake. Yes, you did. I'm sorry. I stood up, buttoned my jacket. Sign the papers, Cassie. Move on with your life. Owen placed a pen on top of the settlement document. Cassie stared at it for a long moment, then picked it up with trembling hands. She signed her name in 3 places, each signature shakier than the last. We're done here, Owen said, gathering the documents. I walked out without looking back. In the hallway, Owen handed me a copy of the signed settlement. Congratulations, he said. You're officially free. Thanks, Owen, for everything. He nodded, shook my hand. What are you going to do now? I looked out the window at the city below, the afternoon sun painting everything gold. I'm going to live my life, the one I should have been living all along. The office overlooked the harbor, floor-to-ceiling windows showing sailboats drifting across blue water under a clear September sky. My new company, Davis Aviation Consulting Group, had expanded to 15 employees, with contract from 3 major airlines and 2 aerospace manufacturers. The Boeing partnership had opened doors I'd only dreamed about 5 years ago. I was reviewing a safety audit report when my assistant knocked on the doorframe. Mr. Davis? You have a visitor. She says it's personal. I looked up. Who is it? Cassie Davis. I set down my pen. Tell her I'm busy. She said she'd wait. She's been sitting in the lobby for 40 minutes. I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. 5 minutes. That's all. Cassie walked in looking smaller than I remembered. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. No designer clothes, no expensive jewelry. She looked tired, older somehow. Thank you for seeing me, she said, standing awkwardly by the door. You have 5 minutes. She nodded, clasped her hands together. I wanted to apologize. For everything. For the lies, the affair, the way I left. You deserved better. Yes, I did. I lost the house, she continued. The bank foreclosed 3 months ago. I couldn't afford the repairs or the mortgage payments. Preston left me after he realized I didn't have any money. My mother won't return my calls. I'm living with a friend in Aurora, working retail at a mall. I didn't say anything, just waited. I threw everything away, Cassie said, her voice breaking. I had a good husband, a good life. and I destroyed it because I thought I deserved something better, something I didn't earn. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I wanted you to know I understand now. What I lost. What you were. She wiped her eyes. I saw the article about your company in Business Journal. You're successful, Holden. Really successful. And I'm happy for you. I stood up, walked to the window. A sailboat was tacking across the harbor, white sails bright against the blue water. I appreciate you coming here, I said, not turning around. But I don't have anything to say to you. You made your choices. You wanted someone wealthier, and you thought you found him. It's not my fault you were wrong. I know. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. Noted. I turned to face her. My assistant will show you out. Cassie nodded, started to leave, then stopped. Are you seeing anyone? I smiled slightly. That's none of your business. She nodded again, understanding. Goodbye, Holden. Goodbye, Cassie. She left. I watched from my window as she crossed the parking lot to an old Honda Civic, got in, and drove away. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, not even pity. Just the quiet certainty that I'd moved on to something better. My phone buzzed. A text from Amanda, the aerospace engineer I'd been seeing for the past 3 months. Still on for dinner tonight? I typed back. Absolutely. 7 o'clock. Perfect. I set the phone down and looked out at the harbor again. The sailboat had caught the wind, moving fast now toward open water. I'd spent 13 years of my life tied to someone who'd seen me as a transaction, a means to an end. Now I was finally free to build something real. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, warm on my face. Somewhere across town, Cassie was probably crying in her friend's apartment, regretting every choice that had led her there. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had work to do, a business to run, and a life to live. A simple life, maybe, but it was mine.